This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. Thank you very much for joining me, and you've joined me at another of our World Cup series, where in the run-up to this year's tournament I have been speaking with various fans and players who have attended previous finals. Now, we began right at the beginning, looking at the history of the tournament. I then spoke with Brian Douglas, who played for England in both the 1958 and 1962 finals. Then, with various fans who went to 1966, 1970 and 1982. All of those can be found on previous episodes, either on threelionspodcast.com or your podcast provider of choice. It's also on YouTube, should that be the way you like it. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on them as well. You can get in touch via social media. Just search Three Lions Podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You'll find it all there. And you may remember I spoke with Pat Napier about the 1970 tournament held in Mexico. Well, for the second time, the tournament was held there again. 1986, which is where we find ourselves now. And this time, I'll be speaking with England and Alfreton Town fan Paddy Buckley, who went, and we'll also hear from another England player who was part of Bobby Robson's squad. We'll get to those memories soon, but before that, let's find out the backstory to the finals. So it was back in June 1974. FIFA, they awarded the 1986 World Cup to the South American country of Colombia. Initially, as a 16-team tournament, Colombia had submitted their proposal based on that. However, FIFA then changed their criteria and expanded the amount of teams from 16 to 24 for the 1982 Spain World Cup. Colombia said, as a nation, they were unable to host that many teams, despite FIFA President João Havelange's insistence that it could revert to a 16-nation competition. Over a period of time, it became apparent that the country couldn't afford to host the competition anyway. And then on the 5th of November 1982, with less than 4 years to go, they officially announced that they couldn't host it. Mexico, United States and Canada then all submitted bids to replace Colombia. Mexico would go on to be awarded the tournament for the second time after hosting 16 years previously in 1970. And in doing so, they became the first country to host twice. Both America and Canada were quite displeased that they weren't properly considered, with things getting very political. America pointing out that Colombia had 2 seats on FIFA's executive committee. And Canada, well, they said Mexico's 10-page bid document was a joke. And just as in 1960, when Chile were due to host the 1962 tournament, Mexico City suffered a violent earthquake just 8 months before the World Cup commencing. It measured 8.0 on the moment magnitude scale. The death toll, whilst no official numbers were ever given, it was believed to be anywhere between 5,000 and 30,000. Mexico stood strong though, and maintained that they could still host the tournament, especially as none of the planned venues had been affected. This would be Bobby Robson's first crack at World Cup qualifying, after Euro 84 didn't really go to plan. Many of the red top newspapers had already been very vocal in the way things had gone, and this was something Robson would have to endure throughout his tenure, as Fleet Street journalists were still displeased that Brian Clough wasn't in the hot seat. England were drawn in Group 3 of European qualifying, alongside Northern Ireland, Romania, Finland and Turkey. And the top 2 teams in the group, well, they would go on to the Mexico finals. England easily made it through, finishing with 12 points, thanks to 4 wins and 4 draws. Manchester United's Brian Robson was the top scorer in the group with 5 goals. And we ended up with a goal difference of plus 19, mainly due to an 8-0 away victory over Turkey. Northern Ireland would finish second, also securing their place at the finals. Romania, Finland and Turkey, well, they would all miss out. There would be 24 teams at the finals, including 13 from Europe. And those other European nations to automatically qualify were Poland from Group 1, West Germany and Portugal from Group 2, France and Bulgaria from Group 4, Hungary from Group 5, Denmark and Soviet Union from Group 6, and Spain from Group 7. Now, there was an exciting playoff between Group 1's second place Belgium and second place in Group 5, the Netherlands. Belgium won the first leg by a 0-0 at home, and the Dutch would win the second leg 2-1 in Rotterdam. It ended 2-2 on aggregate, but the Red Devils of Belgium went through on away goals. And the last spot was a playoff between European Group 7, second place finishers Scotland, and the Oceania Group winners. A group that comprised of Australia, Israel, New Zealand, and Chinese Taipei. Australia finished top and set up a 2-legged playoff with Scotland. Could there be a game with a further distance to travel between? Scotland would ultimately win 2-0 on aggregate and find themselves in the finals. As holders, Italy would qualify automatically, as would Mexico as hosts. From around the world, Canada made their one and only appearance to date. Iraq and the Korean Republic, or South Korea as we know them, made it from the Asian group. And from South America, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay and Uruguay would qualify. Once qualified, Bobby Robson's first World Cup squad was as follows. 3 goalkeepers: Peter Shilton from Southampton, Chris Woods of Norwich City, Gary Bailey of Manchester United. Defenders: there was Gary Stevens of Everton, Kenny Sansom of Arsenal, Alvin Martin from West Ham, Terry Butcher of Ipswich Town, Viv Anderson, who was at Arsenal, Terry Fenwick of QPR, and there was Gary Stevens from Tottenham Hotspur. In midfield, Glenn Hoddle, again, of Tottenham Hotspur, Brian Robson, captain from Manchester United, Ray Wilkins, well, he was at AC Milan at the time, Chris Waddle was at Tottenham, Peter Reid and Trevor Stephen were both from Everton, and Steve Hodge from Aston Villa. And up front, Mark Haitley, like Ray Wilkins, he was from AC Milan. Gary Lineker was at Everton, John Barnes from Watford, Peter Beardsley, Newcastle United, and Chelsea's Kerry Dixon. For those of us back home, TV was the main way to keep up with the games. The BBC's World Cup grandstand opening theme tune was by a band called Heads, and this was called Aztec Lightning. And by contrast, ITV, well, they had their classic intro theme, which still sounds great to this day. On the promotional front for the competition, just as a stereotypical orange had been used for Spain in 1982. This time, a Mexican green jalapeno pepper was used, sporting a large moustache and wearing a sombrero. He was named Piqué. The poster this time was a little more exciting than the 1970 effort. This was a photo shot by Annie Leibovitz, an American photographer. She was the last person to photograph John Lennon before he was fatally shot. And this poster shows a selection of Aztec statues up against a blue sky. And against one of these statues is a human shadow with its arm bent up and its leg angled as if to kick the real-life football that sat stationary at the foot of one of these statues. So on to the finals we go. England were drawn in Group F alongside Morocco, Poland and Portugal. With 2 points for a win and 1 for a draw, it wasn't the best starts at the competition. I read that it was called the Group of Sleep. After the first 4 games, only produced 2 goals. And 5 of the 6 games were played in Monterrey, but between 2 different stadiums there. And the last group game, between Portugal and Morocco, was in Zapopan, some 800 kilometres from Monterrey. And Monterrey was the most northern of host cities to be used in 1986, as it seems most of the cities were fairly centralised. So with that in mind, I think it's high time we spoke with England fan Paddy Buckley. So 36 years ago, England headed to Mexico for the World Cup finals for the second time after being eliminated in the quarterfinals to West Germany back in 1970. Could they do any better this time? Let's find out. Let's find out how the story went, what it was like to be there. I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast England fan Paddy Buckley, as I say, was there. Paddy, hello there.
Hello.
You well?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good stuff. 36 years ago, we've made it to 1986 in the series here. If you don't mind me asking, how old were you back then?
36, 86, I would be 25.
Okay. So it was 86 was the World Cup then. Did you remember 82?
I do remember 82.
Did you go to that?
Go.
Oh, right.
No, 86 was my first one.
Right.
I'd been abroad watching football with Forest for European Cup wins and obviously some of the knockout games. But this was my first World Cup abroad.
Okay. Because the England qualifying games were played from 84 to 85 in our group there. We had, was it Finland, Turkey, Northern Ireland and Romania? Did you go to some of those?
No, to be honest with you, I've not been to an England home game until relatively recently.
Right.
A couple of years ago, probably. I went to Mexico, I went to Italy, but I've not seen England play at home other than when they played at Old Trafford.
Oh, really?
Against South Africa.
I see.
96, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't put my finger on when it was, but I remember there was a game, against South Africa up in that neck of the woods. Yes, yeah. So England qualified for the Mexico World Cup. As I was just saying to you, or before we started recording, I only just remember it. I was 7 or 8 at the time. And just doing my research about it, I didn't realise that originally the tournament was going to be held in Colombia.
Yeah.
Were you going to go if it was in Colombia?
No. It had already changed to Mexico. We were talking about it in pub, and everybody's I'll go.
Yeah,
it with 2 of us going after about a dozen, and we're booked with a company called South American Travel, which sounds iffy, doesn't it? So what we thought at that time, you didn't get no refunds, from if anybody went bust.
Oh, no.
You've got to go through ABTA, and it used to take about 6 months to get your money back. So we went to Ilkeston Co-op Travel, which is not far from us. It's only about 10 miles from us. And they had a policy of giving you immediate refund. And they were the only travel agent in country that did it. So we went and we booked with them, and there were 3 tours. There was the old tour. So you went from start, you went for, a final, and you got back. I can't remember how much it was. It was expensive.
Yeah.
And then there was the first half of the competition, and then there was the second half. And I went for the second half. And it was £1,350 for that.
Wow.
Supposedly included tickets. But anyway, it didn't matter because they were, as soon as the first lot was supposed to fly out, they went bust. So at least we had a fortnight to sort something out. Obviously, the people who were going, due to fly out for the beginning of the tournament, they got no chance. And if they're not booked through, say, Ilkeston Co-op, they were going to have to fight for the money back through ABTA.
Yeah.
If they were covered by ABTA.
Of course.
As it turned out, it saved us loads of money because we went back to Ilkeston Co-op and they were brilliant and they just sorted us flights out. So we got a flight from Gatwick to Euston, and we had about 3 and 3/4 hour wait there. So we just got a taxi there. We went through 20 minutes, said, drop us to bar, come on, pick us up. Come on, pick us up in a few hours. So, it was great. And we got back and we were knackered by the time we got back because, you're going the wrong way, so it's making it a long day.
Yeah.
We arrived in Mexico City around about midnight. We just fell into a taxi and said, take us to a hotel, which we ain't a very good move because they took us to most expensive, where they were probably going to pay off out of it.
Right.
But we needed a bed.
Yeah.
So that were our start to tournament.
So you went for what, the second half of the tournament? So did you watch the group games at home then?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mooring pub. In fact, we watched the England. England were terrible.
They were.
First, and they had to win the last game. We were flying out the following day, and I think it was 10 o'clock at night, the game against Poland. And we had to win that game, otherwise we were out of tournament.
And you knew you had tickets.
We were sat watching it in pub. If they lost, we got flights. We got flights out. We got no tickets to games.
Right.
We'd been knackered. And Jim Rosenthal come on at half time. And he said, if anybody's... They were all trying to discourage England fans to go because there were this trouble mentality back in the time.
Yeah.
Trouble followed England everywhere. Well, it didn't follow them everywhere. It followed them where they could afford to go to. Of
course.
Most of the time it were people who weren't even interested in football. So for the first 2 weeks of tournament, they were known as Los Animales. There were press following them around, just wanting trouble to happen. So the Mexicans were, are you Los Animales? And he said no. And then you were the best mate. You said that.
Yeah.
So it weren't a problem for us. It was just, I think it was more the press that were wanting the story out there. And that's what they were like. They'd be paying people to throw chairs through a window or something like that. And it got England a bad name, and the bad name got people expecting more.
Yeah.
So I don't think there were any trouble in group games, but it was just, more publicity went to Los Animales than to football.
Right.
So anyway, we were in pub watching this game, and we were flying out following morning, and fortunately, Gary Lineker scored a hat-trick.
This was where his tournament started, wasn't it?
It was. And as I say, Jim Rosenthal were there, and he was saying he got a ticket up for the next game against Paraguay. He said, I've just had to pay £100 for this ticket. So if you're coming out, I won't bother. You're not going to get tickets. You're not going to get this and that and all we ignored that anyway, and we got down to Gatwick and we flew over, and we had a good time in Euston, 3 or 4 hours that we got.
Nice.
We got down and we got nothing booked or anything. We just got our flights there. So we're in this hotel and we thought, right, we'll go down to the stadium, see about getting tickets, first thing, and see if we can see any England fans and find out what the crack is.
Because this was Mexico City, wasn't it, where the Azteca?
Yeah. Also, 6 months beforehand, they did a massive earthquake.
Yeah.
There were lots of people killed, thousands of people killed. And when we got there were people still living under plastic, plastic sheets in city. There'd be like a bank that's there, and it'd be massive structure, not a thing wrong with it. Then there'd be all the buildings where people were living, and you could see where the reinforcing stopped in the buildings.
Right.
And above that, they fell down. Obviously, they fell down.
Yeah. Because
they were saving money and not reinforcing it.
Yeah.
So all this, it was all down to a lot of corruption and stuff like that. And we come on to that. We're pleased because you stop and ask a police officer away, he wants $5 to tell you. Yeah, yeah. And there were lots of police about during World Cup, which were good.
Yeah,
for us. I witnessed what it was like the day after final, because I got a ticket for final, and it was a different place altogether. When you went down on Metro, it was a different place altogether with no police there.
So what did they... I mean, there were stories about, like, when Russia hosted the World Cup, the last World Cup, that perhaps allegedly maybe Putin got everyone out of the way to make a good spectacle for FIFA. And you were saying it was sort of the same 36 years ago.
There were police everywhere, all the time, all out on streets, on metros, all around grounds. There were police everywhere. The day after, there were none.
Really?
Yeah, there were none. And we had one incident where this girl got a wallet snatched, and what they did is they just went down with a Stanley knife on a handbag, and took it out outside her handbag. She didn't realise until after she got off at Underground, but there were, a nice bag, nice handbag, cut down outside, and purse had gone.
No, rotten.
So, so during World Cup, there was a big presence of police, and it was a really good atmosphere. We got there, so we went to ground, and it was just like they open when they like, they'll have a CS, and we were being told you just need to wait, and eventually they'll open up. So we just hung around, and a couple of hours later, the ticket office opened up, and we got a ticket for Paraguay game, which Jim Rosenthal paid £100 for £6.
Now, was he pulling a fast one, or was he...
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He may have, been had.
Yeah.
But no, I think he was trying to put people off going.
Right.
And I think he was probably told to do that as well. But, we went up to ticket office, £6 for, equivalent to £6.
Yes.
We met some England fans, and we found out whereabouts to stop in city, which hotels to go for, and we were paying 50p a night after that.
Nice.
We got back to our hotel, and we had to have 2 nights in the one that we paid £18 for because we'd hung around to get tickets, so we weren't able to check out. So we had 2 nights there. But after that, we were paying 50p a night. And the only difference was it were black and white television.
Really?
No, well, really. There were clean sheets every day. What more do you want?
Just somewhere to put your head down, isn't it?
Yeah. And it were all Choco Milko on television anyway. It were all Hugo Sánchez were in every advert.
Right.
Who were main Spanish footballer.
Yeah.
So, that was a difference. 50p a night, I couldn't believe it. It was just so cheap.
Yeah.
It were like cafes where you went in for a beer, and it were equivalent to 10 pence a bottle.
So you don't, back then they weren't hiking the prices up then?
Well, yeah, they do. Yeah, well, they would, like, for example, in the Azteca, you sit and watch and have a beer. And, remember at the cinema where they used to have the thing round the neck and like a tray where you all ice creams and things in? Well, they had them with beer in.
Right.
They'd have about, I don't know, they'd have about 30 pints on one of these trays hung round the neck.
Yeah.
And they wanted to sell it. And if you put your hand up in ground, they'd race each other, climbing over everybody to get to your face to get the sale. And that were like, and that were like equivalent to 50 pence, I think.
Right.
And it went, I can't remember how much a pint would be back in that time over here. But, I'm just comparing it to prices in pubs. So it was 5 times more in stadium.
Yeah.
You go in a bar and they don't, you just get your beer out of the fridge and there'll be a group of you and you'll be sat there for a few hours. And when you go in, they just come down and count all empty bottles.
Seems an easy way to do things, doesn't it?
And that's what they charge you, and you get charged for how many empty bottles are there.
So there's not many people in England, I guess, that have been to the Azteca. And from what I can gather, from pictures I've seen, it doesn't seem to have changed a great deal. No. It looks a fabulous stadium. It's big. It looks quite steep. But go on, tell us what it's like in there.
It's massive. It's because it was seater as well. It were 120,000 seater stadium, but you'd be walking up it, and there'll be these great big cracks in it.
Really?
Probably earthquake. But they went. It's a really steady built place. It's just a mass of concrete, and rather than steps, you've got ramps where you walk up. Okay. You walk ramp, so you're probably walking halfway around stadium, going up.
Yeah.
And our seats were in top, weren't they?
Okay.
We were in corner, and that's where we were for nearly all games. In corner at top, and you got obviously you could sit where you like in that area.
Yeah.
And that's when all beer men were coming round because they always come round to where England fans were here.
Were there many England fans there?
Yeah, there were quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were some behind goal.
Right.
I think those where we were them who just turned up, got a ticket.
Right.
I think the ones that had come, I don't know if they were official trips back in them days. They would have been behind goal.
Yeah.
I don't know, unless they're all we travel agents who got tickets.
Yeah.
Because they all seem to be, they'd all be on act and making a fortune out of it.
Yeah.
So, that rare experience there, it was fantastic when we were there. I was worried about eating.
Right.
I didn't eat anything for the first 3 days. Then once I was dead, I didn't stop. You were frightened of catching something, and by the time you're done, you're eating off all the street stalls, doing tacos and all sorts.
Yeah.
But, if you're out at night, you'd be accompanied by rats running around, hundreds of them.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Near all fast food places. They come out at, drains front road.
Yeah.
They just like hundreds of them come running out. In daytime, obviously you don't see them, but they knew the way around.
Yeah. Well, they knew where the food was.
Yeah, they know where the food was.
Oh, Mexico City is quite high above sea level as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually built in a volcano.
What, the city?
Yeah. It's an old volcano that's leveled off. The top of it leveled off, and it were a lake at one time.
Right.
Back in Montezuma's day, and there a pathway across the water to this island, and gradually it filled in, and this is why it's not a very stable place. when the earthquake happened, and being in a volcano, that makes it susceptible to earthquakes, things like that. We didn't know whether it was going to be cancelled or not, because obviously it had been, it should have been in Colombia. So it was late. I mean, it was about a year, I think, when they moved it, year before. And then they had the earthquake, and they were never really, they're always confident that it'd go on. And they never really shown you the people living under sheets of polythene and things like that back in England. They just says how they're getting on with it. And, but when you got there and you seen it, all the big smart hotels are there. They're still there, not touched. And it's just the residential buildings where they've, built so far and then missing materials out of them. So,
Well, England won that first game that you saw 3-0. Lineker got another 2, and Beardsley got 1. I bet you were thankful that you got to see a win.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. And when we were down at Azteca, we also got tickets for next games if we won.
Right.
While we're there, we bought tickets for... I didn't get one for the final there. I got one for Paraguay, Argentina, and that it was semi-final, wasn't it? It would have been Belgium. It was Argentina, Belgium.
Right.
But, we got tickets for them there and then, like, when they got a little bit dearer as they went on in tournament, but not particularly expensive.
So did you go with the intention of, I want to see as many games as possible?
Yeah. One of the things I'd tell you about, Mexico, they got through to knockout stages. They've never won a knockout game. Right. And they got drawn against Bulgaria. And they beat Bulgaria, and Mexico City were fantastic that night.
Yeah.
Everybody were out on streets. Everybody. There were all vehicles going down streets. You've never seen out like it. And the vehicles would be covered in people. You couldn't see the bodywork and, the buses, and there'd be odd car, which were nearly always a Volkswagen Beetle. There were millions of them about, and all these buses that were belching thick black smoke out, and it was fantastic. All the horns going, and you're out on the street, and they come up to you. Are you Andy Marley? You say no. Oh, so they buy you a drink, and they were brilliant.
The tequila, was it?
Tequila, yeah.
Tell me you were wearing a what's the hat? The sombrero. Joining in.
I joined in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've got an England T-shirt on. That's why they come up saying, "Are you Andy Marley?"
Of course, yeah.
And they were great. As soon as he says no, they were your best friend. It was fantastic. An experience I'll never forget that way.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like that after a football game. And, the whole city was celebrating. And I was thinking, I hope we don't end up playing them.
Well, that's always the thing, isn't it? They say that the tournaments are always better the longer the host nation stays in it or does well.
Yes. Yeah, and it were unbelievable. I'll give you an example. We went to Acapulco. And we're like, you just go to the airport and you just queue up and get a standby flight. 15 quid it were either 15 quid, you're there in half an hour, or 3 quid on a bus, and it took 6 hours. So obviously, you went, you queued up at the airport to get on, and we got on one every time. We didn't get turned away, and we'd come back from that day before England's next game, and France were playing Brazil.
Right.
At the time we got back to airport, and every television in airport had got game on, and carousels for suitcases, they were turned off. They weren't doing it till after the game finished, and it was a game. It went to penalties. I think France beat them on penalties. First game, I went to see Argentina against Uruguay in a place called Pablo, and that costed about 90 pence on bus, about 90 mile away. We just found out. You go to the local bus station and find out transport-wise, and it were these old buses. And it was, I think Mexico City were like equivalent to smoking 40 fags a day because of pollution. Really? And it were these buses, it was thick black smoke they belch out. But anyway, we got on one, we went to Pablo, and we didn't know what to expect because because it had been Falklands 4 years beforehand, hadn't it? But we'd not played them or anything, and, us being English. But we went, and first bar we went to were full of Argentinians. Nobody said no. Nobody, no animosity or anything from any of them. We went to that. You pay on gate for a ticket, get in. So our first game, Argentina won that 1-0, and it pissed it down.
Did it?
During its second half, it rained that hard, it ate you. We'd only got T-shirt and shorts on, and you're in a stadium with no roof on, and so there was no escape from it.
No.
And it rained about 10, 15 minutes, and, you're absolutely saturated. 10, 15 minutes later, you'll go dry again because it was that hot. And that it rained really hard every day, round about the same time.
Did it?
Yeah.
That's strange.
Yeah, in Acapulco, they've got these runoffs for river that you think, why have you got them? And, they're bone dry, you're looking at it. When it rains, it'll be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It rains and it rains. Absolutely buckets it down. And of course, it runs in a torrent down from hills and that, and down through these gullies. And, even roads were flooded, and we were in this taxi, and again, it were a Beetle, and he's driving down the road, and there's just water shooting up front floor. Or, we're both sat inside, you're going like this to get away from it. Shooting up as he's driving along the floor.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm going back to the thing you said there, that a World Cup, held in Mexico, but 2 South American teams playing each other, and it was pay on the gate, which I find amazing in a World Cup.
Yeah. You'll plenty of room, Grant.
Yeah. And yet, no trouble with, say, the Argentines. Were you wearing an England shirt or anything?
No, we just went in ordinary T-shirt.
Yeah, nothing to give you away.
No, well, your speaking gives it away.
Cool. Well, yes.
When you're speaking, they know.
Mm.
And we found it were better to be known as English in Mexico because they hated Americans.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. They thought you're American, they wouldn't like you. But English were fine.
As long as you weren't Los Animals.
Yeah, as long as you were Los Animales, yeah.
So, I mean, watching Argentina, who would obviously go on to win it, could you see then that they were decent? Obviously, they
were a good side. I wouldn't say no, not looking on that performance. I wouldn't expect them to win it, but yeah, they were a good side. We went to Italy against France,
right,
a few days later, and that were a good game. France won that. France were playing well at the time.
And Italy were the holders, weren't they?
Yeah. But France could easily have won that tournament. They beat Brazil. I think they got knocked out by Germany, didn't they?
So that was the big semi-final, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because this was Platini's era.
Yeah, he scored in that game we went to.
Right.
Yeah, that was at the old Olympic Stadium where what was his name?
Bob Beamer.
No. Bob Beamer, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he jumped an incredible length on long jump that didn't get beat for tens of years.
Yeah. That was in that stadium.
That was there, yeah. And no different, like so, just no roofs on anywhere.
Because I looked at where a lot of the host cities were in Mexico. They were all quite central, apart from, was it Monterrey, where the England's group games were? And you said that was it Pablo? Yeah, and they were all easy to get to, were they, from Mexico City?
Well, it was easy enough to get by because flights were that cheap.
Right.
you get a flight from Mexico City to Guadalajara, you wouldn't want to be travelling by bus there because obviously you're up a mountain or a volcano, and it's you're all meandering roads, and so it'd take forever. But flights. We went to Acapulco twice and Cancun before it were a resort.
Right.
Amazing. It were amazing to see it because they were turning it into a holiday resort, and it were like paradise. You know, there were toucans flying. There was only one hotel there then. I mean, now it's like Blackpool, isn't it? With hotels all the way down beach, aren't they?
Well, by all accounts, I've never been, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, there's like a road running down, cut through. It's like a tropical jungle, and there's a road running down or parallel to the coast, and about a mile inland. And they'll be like, we had a car and we had to drive down it. And I said, "Whoa, there's a dog hit road here," and it went a dog. It was a bloody lizard. It was a great big lizard.
Was it?
Yeah. And there were snakes and all sorts on the roads because it were like a jungle. And you just take a left and follow, and it could just go down to the beach, and it could just be like paradise type of place. White sands and sea that you could see floor as far as you could see.
Nice.
But red hot, really, too hot.
Yeah.
And they come asking you, are you American? And no, that's all right. It wasn't the holiday season because it's too hot. The Americans start coming down around about September, I think. And then, they didn't particularly like them, but they would read the money.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think it was you say it's red hot. Was it wise really having a World Cup during that season in Mexico?
Well, before, it wasn't as hot in Mexico City as what it was there.
Right.
Because you obviously, is it about 10,000 feet up?
Give or take. Remember. Yeah.
But it gets colder, don't it? Yeah, but it was still hot, and it still rained every day.
Right.
You could set your watch by it. But it was. I thought it was a fantastic place because it was so cheap. You could do whatever you wanted. If there a plane to catch, the Cancun were quite expensive flight. You're about £70 return. We got a return for that. But £4 in an hotel when we get there.
Yeah.
And I had a car date cheap, and it was like a once in a lifetime type of thing. All that holiday cost me less than what I got a bank loan to go.
Right.
To pay the £1,350. What we paid South American travel, all the money that we got back paid for everything else.
It worked out kindly for you there.
It did, yeah.
So back to the football. They'd made it past Paraguay in that round of 16.
Yeah.
It was the quarterfinals against Argentina. I mean, I say I don't remember it, but I can remember my parents talking about the fact it was Argentina and obviously, as you've mentioned, the Falklands and that. And I imagine that the newspapers back here were probably giving it large as they were. And but what was the feeling out there prior to the game?
It was just excitement, really.
Yeah.
Where we played the previous two games, we obviously thought we got a chance of winning the tournament, not just the Argentina game. I think if we'd have beat Argentina, we'd have won the tournament, because we were better than the other sides left, in it. And to be fair, we had every chance. Right up to end where Lineker missed it. Did he? We could have equalised. I know that everybody, it's always handball, don't it? Internet, but, we didn't have VAR in them days.
No.
You had to accept what happened. And if it had been other way round, we'd have accepted it, wouldn't we?
Well, yeah, you have to, we would have taken it.
You wouldn't have bothered. It annoys me a bit when I see, you see some of these players, they're 30 years on, and they're just as bad about it now bad feeling about it now as what there was then, and not got over it. At the end of the day, it's a game of football.
Mm.
If they'd have been better, it wouldn't have mattered whether he handballed it or not, because he wouldn't have got to it.
Yeah. So where were you?
We were other side of ground, in the same place as previous game.
Yeah.
Up in goal. You're looking down other end of pitch, and it were obvious from where we were. I mean, you couldn't have got further away than what we were.
Yeah.
And it were obvious what happened. But referee played play on, didn't he? Know what you could do about it.
But then as well, from the vantage point you had, you've seen that goal and saw it blatantly. You've obviously had a great view of the second goal.
Yeah.
That was a cracking goal.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I see Maradona play in 1, 2, 4 games there. Best player I ever seen by a mile.
Mm.
I mean, including likes of Messi and Ronaldo today. They protected, not like he was. He got some right hammer, and he just got up and got on with it. And it was fantastic.
Yeah. So, what was the feeling coming out? Obviously, we'd been beaten by Argentina. We'd been beaten by the hand of God. But what did you feel coming out?
Gutted. Oh, gutted, but pride. We effort they put in, and particularly after it started the tournament, because it were pathetic start to tournament, and we were a bit lucky really that one got sent off, and other one got his injury, which he did all the time. And it was a shoulder injury, wasn't it?
Robson,
came out again when he first fell off it, and after them two were out the side, we improved no end. And like I said, I thought if we could have won that game, we'd have won the tournament. And just a feeling of pride in team actually after the game had finished. They know what you can do about under God.
No.
So there's no point in learning it. Do your head in. It's football. End of the day, it's football, isn't it? And that's what happens all the time. And they've introduced VAR to try and stop it, and it don't, does it?
No. There's still things that happen that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And
they'll go on, and they'll say, well, this is not good enough. We need to do something else. And it's all people that's not playing, isn't it? It's all people who have finished playing that are doing the moaning about it, and they do all the talking about it, and I don't like it. Do you? I mean, when you go to a game of football and it stopped for 3 minutes, and you don't know whether you can celebrate a goal or not.
That's the frustrating thing, isn't it? Where if you're waiting and waiting, you've celebrated initially, then it comes up on the screen that someone's having a look at it, and you think, okay, they can have a quick glance over it, but that quick glance over it turns out to be 3 minutes. And even if the goal's given, it's a bit of a letdown of a feeling. And then if it's not given, it's a bit of a groan, and it's not working.
Fortunately, I don't get to put up with this at Alfreton Town games.
No,
but I got it at England against Holland. England against Holland in Guimarães
in the Nations League,
and we celebrated. And hang on, there's a VAR check, and it were about an inch offside.
His big toe, I think, wasn't
it? You can't. If it were offside, it's offside. It's offside, I suppose. But it's taking the enjoyment out of football, and I'd rather put up with things like the under God and do away with this, so we can start enjoying football again. Personally,
it's conversational as well, isn't it? You can talk after the game about incidents.
Yeah.
I mean, if VAR had intervened with Maradona and not given it, no one would remember it, because the game would have hopefully have gone on, and no one would have remembered it. Yeah, you're right. So England were out, but you weren't coming home just yet, though, were you?
No. I went to next game against Belgium. And he did exactly the same to Belgium. He didn't handball it, but he'd just run through them like they went there, and scored a similar goal to the second goal against England.
Yeah.
Incredible player. And I managed to get a ticket for the final off an England fan in Acapulco.
Right.
He wasn't bothered about going, and he was skinned, and he'd got the most expensive ticket, which was £32.
For a final ticket.
Yeah. I gave him 40 quid for it, and I don't know whether I sat in right seat or not, but I was like just above where the receipt trophy.
Really?
Yeah.
So not only did you have a great view of the game, the pitch, but was he in Maradona obviously within touching distance of you? Or
no, I wouldn't say in touching distance, but within about 20 yards.
Really?
Yeah. Down a level.
Wow.
But yeah, you could walk all the way around ground.
Yeah.
And there weren't all this ticket checking and wherever your people tended to go where they had a ticket for.
Right.
And I went sure where I got to sit, so I'm walking around ground, and I just went in anyway to watch the game. And I stopped there, it was a good view, so I was I was opposite end of ground I was for England games.
Yeah.
Probably round about on goal line.
Yeah.
Just right at goal line, and at the end where he scored winner. Because they got two back. They were winning 2-0, weren't they? Argentina, and the Germans got two back, equalised. I think Maradona put him through for a winner.
Burruchaga, wasn't it, who scored the winner? I'm just looking at a picture here of of him with the trophy, probably where he's just picked it up, and you're probably within, I don't know.
I'd be just up to...
Just to one side of him.
Well, you can see next level up there.
Yeah, just in the corner there.
Well, I'm on front of that level, just to other side of him.
So were there a lot of Argentine fans or Germans in there as well?
Yeah, there were, but it was full. I mean, compared to some other games, like obviously people want to go to them games, don't they? And
get the final,
even when they're not bothered about going to all others.
Yeah,
but yeah, it were all right. I stopped in after the game, just to
soak it up.
check that. Yeah. And I had to walk all the way around through Argentine fans and back round through. There weren't any Germans left in ground by then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it were interesting. Good, it's good to experience something like that. I mean, it would be better if England had been there.
Of course.
And then I went to Italy in the 90s and semi-final, got knocked out, penalties.
Yeah.
So we do, aren't we? We do.
Just can't get over the line at the moment, can we?
No, but we're doing as well now as we ever have done.
Yep. High hopes for this year?
Yeah.
And are you going?
I'm hoping to, yeah.
Right.
I'm hoping to. It's a matter of how long for. The way I'm looking at it, probably group games and first knockout game to start with.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what we like regarding wake and
all the important things, time and money.
But at the end of the day, you have some fantastic times following football. You remember for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Great to hear from Paddy there. It's one of those tournaments that when I see footage from it, it kind of still feels so distant. I think I've read in the past, actually, of delays in the footage coming back to England from Mexico, all with its ever so slightly grainy footage. There was certainly no 4K HDR back then, was there? Now, from a previous episode of the Three Lions podcast, we've done this one back in 2019. I spoke with a member of that 1986 squad, and this is a little extract of what Tottenham's Gary Stevens told me about the tournament.
Now, with 7 senior England caps to his name, World Cup appearances too, I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, Gary Stevens. Hello.
Hello, and delighted to join you. Thanks for contacting me, and I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. And as we're leaving the pitch at Wembley afterwards, having picked up our winners' medal against Scotland in the Rouse Cup in '86, Bobby Robson came across to me and he said, "You are useful." It was definitely useful, not useless. He said, "You are useful." And I absolutely knew at that point that I was going to end up in his squad of 22 for the World Cup Mexico '86.
Oh, great. That's got to be the highlight, hasn't it, being picked for the '86 squad?
Well, yeah, I think it's right up there for sure, because my schoolboy dreams and my hopes and ambitions as a young kid, you know, one was definitely to play in the World Cup for England, playing the World Cup finals for England. So, yeah, it was amazing. I was actually at home at the time. I was in the back garden at my house in Broxbourne in Hertfordshire at the time, which was where I was living when I was playing at Spurs. And my girlfriend, she might have been my fiancée, she ultimately became my wife, came out into the garden and said, "You've been picked. And I said, "How do you know? How do you know?" She said, "I've just seen it. It's on teletext." Do you remember the days of teletext?
Yes.
That's exactly how I found out. You know, the squad had been announced, and my girlfriend told me that she'd seen it on the TV on teletext. You know, obviously, subsequently, the club were advised. The club spoke to me. England spoke to me. I got the official letter, etc., etc. But again, going back to '86, very different days as far as communication and processes are concerned.
Amazing on teletext. So you came on as a sub against Morocco, then again against Paraguay. And I don't know if back then assists were counted or looked upon as much, but you got a World Cup assist, didn't you, squaring the ball to Gary Lineker?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you hadn't have done, I was going to do so. But the first game you mentioned, Morocco, which was a group game, we'd lost to Portugal in our first game out there. And, you know, Portugal were nothing like the footballing force that they are these days. So it was a big shock. Then the game against Paraguay, Brian Robson dislocated his shoulder. He'd gone out there with a shoulder problem and he dislocated it. And then Ray Wilkins got sent off. So England were down to 10 men, and Bobby Robson sent me on and sacrificed Mark Haitley up front. And it was just a case of, well, it's 0-0. We're down to 10 men. Can we hang on and get a point out of this? We did. And, you know, I felt I played my part in doing that. But, you know, it was just a case of working hard and pulling together. And so after 2 games, we'd had 1 defeat and 1 draw. And we were staring, you know, extinction or the exit to the tournament square in the face. The next game was against Poland, which I wasn't involved in. I sat on the bench again. You know, Lineker did the honours with a hat trick, if I remember correctly, and suddenly we were into the last 16. We then moved to Mexico City, and we prepared for that well, because although we weren't playing at altitude, we'd been staying at altitude and coming down to play lower level in the group stages. So we're now Mexico City, we're at altitude, and the Azteca Stadium was monstrous, but the pitch was absolutely shocking. The surface was dreadful. We're playing Paraguay into the second half. Peter Reid struggling a little bit with a knock. Bobby Robson made the substitution. I went on for Peter Reid in midfield. And it was one of those quite famous commentary moments, because on the pitch at the time was Gary Stevens Everton, Trevor Steven Everton, and Gary Stevens Spurs. And I think John Motson actually went, "It's Stevens to Steven to Stevens" on one occasion. It did actually happen. But my assist for Gary Lineker was sort of made in Tottenham to some extent. Glenn Hoddle got on the ball in midfield and I made a run forward into the area, knowing that Glenn had the ability to pick me out, which he did with a little outside of the foot pass. And I'm now wide, but into the penalty area. And I know that all I have to do is square it across the face of the goal along the ground, because that is the run that Lineker will make. That's the run that Gary Lineker often makes. So it was the easiest thing in the world for me to slide and with my right foot knock it firmly across the face of the goal, sort of on or around the 6-yard box. And sure enough, there was Mr. Lineker knocking it home. So, yeah, a great moment for me, a good moment for Gary Lineker, and we won the game comfortably, which put us into the quarterfinals.
Well, yes, the quarterfinals. Unfortunately, you were on the bench for that one. And let's cut to the chase. Did you see it? We're going to talk hand of God. Did you see it from the bench?
The simple answer is no, I didn't. We weren't sure. And again, in the Azteca Stadium, the dugout was obviously on the halfway line, but it was set, I don't know, maybe 10 yards back from the pitch, maybe a touch further. And it was literally, you were down in the ground. So your head was maybe a foot above pitch level. It was a shocking place to observe a game from. And if you worked out the yardage, it's probably 70 yards from where we were to where the incident was. All we knew was that something had gone wrong, because as the ball looped up in the air from Steve Hodge, and we're seeing Peter Shilton coming out and he's going to punch it, there's only one thing that's going to happen, and that's Peter Shilton's going to punch it, because he's got a run, he's got the advantage, he's got his arm. And as Diego Maradona challenged for it, somehow the ball went past Peter Shilton and he punched nothing. And then, of course, there's Terry Fennick and there's Terry Butcher, indicating to the referee that it's a handball. My namesake and Gary Stevens of Everton and Kenny Sanson have rushed over to the linesman. They're saying it's handball. All I can assume is that the referee didn't see it from where he was, because if he had, he has to give it. You could say that Diego Maradona did it quite brilliantly, because it was very subtle, almost like the sleight of hand of a magician. But obviously it didn't help our cause too much.
No.
And, somewhat aggrieved, I suppose, if you say, well, if you found yourself in that type of position yourself, would you maybe do similar? I dare say at some stage most of us have, in training, in a match, but maybe not in a World Cup quarter-final, eh?
No. But it must have been what an atmosphere, though. I mean, and Maradona had scored the wonderful goal beforehand as well. Gary Lineker had equalised. Just a great occasion, apart from the result, I guess.
Well, yes, it was a huge occasion for sure. I think there was in excess of 110,000 in the stadium that day. It's going round the world, millions of people watching it. And I think probably the only thing that went really, really wrong for us was the result. Maradona's wonder goal was just that. He had an incredible World Cup in his own right. Didn't single-handedly win it for Argentina, but he was the main reason that they won it. I actually felt leading up to the game that there was too much talk in the England camp about this Maradona, how good he was, what he could do to us, how he could hurt us, what a genius he was, what a top player. And, again, for me, I felt that leading up to it, we should have been talking a bit more about ourselves and how well we'd done against Paraguay and what we could do to Argentina. That's just a personal feeling on it and a personal thought on it. And also from a personal aspect, I was disappointed that I didn't play. I'd come on as a substitute, as we mentioned in the previous game against Paraguay, for Peter Reid. Peter felt that he was fit enough to play in the game against Argentina, and Bobby Robson started him. And leading up to the game, a few days before, Bobby Robson and Don Howe were talking about maybe man-marking Maradona. And they had a conversation with me at one stage as to man-marking. Is it something that I like to do? Is it something that I've ever done? How would I feel about it? In the end, they decided that wasn't the way to do it. And we didn't man-mark Maradona as such. But I can't help looking back and thinking, well, if I had been given that job, because at the time there was no doubt about it, I was super, super fit. If I had been given that job, it just might have made me, but it could have absolutely wrecked me football-wise and psychologically.
Oh, yes. Not worth, well, I say not worth thinking about, but I guess you always do and you always will.
Yeah, I think that's possibly the biggest issue and problems a lot of players have at the end of their careers, that what if scenario. You know, it's hard to win tournaments and it's hard to win trophies. And, you know, in my career, I managed to win 2, you know, European Under-21 Championship with England in 84 and the UEFA Cup with Spurs in 84. But I played in 2 FA Cup finals and I lost them both. I played in 1 World Cup finals, Mexico 86 as we're talking about. And, you know, but for an amazing Diego Maradona goal and an illegal goal, the hand of God goal, who knows? I might actually, with my England colleagues, have ended up getting to the semi-final, the final, and winning it. You just don't know, do you? And I think that's the tough bit to take. And you never know when your next chance might come along. And for me personally, you know, my last appearance for England was in Mexico 86 against Paraguay. I was in a couple of squads after that, but then I had some injury problems. And that's it. It's over. You know, your chance has gone. You've had your day and you got to get on with the rest of your life.
Great to hear from Gary there. If you want to listen to that whole interview I had with him, just whirl back to episode 48 on your podcast provider. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Mexico, 1986. One where Gary Lineker would famously win the Golden Boot with his 6 goals. And both he and Bobby Robson, well, they would get another crack at the finals 4 years later. One that was a little closer to home. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Once again, thank you to Paddy Buckley and to Gary Stevens. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really do. As I mentioned, all the previous episodes can be found at your podcast provider of choice or 3lionspodcast.com. Lots of England memories can be found there. And once again, if you're not following on social media, you can find the show on the likes of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go and give it a follow. My name is Russell Osborne. This is the 3 Lions podcast, and it will be back with you very soon with some more England content. I hope you can join me for it. So until then, look after yourselves. Take care. Cheers.